Football Thursday here on Birds 365, a full practice Thursday, or so we hope. For the Mac guys, John McMullen and Jody McDonald here, John. Birds 365. Johnny Mac, another day counting down to the final regular season game, Eagles-Giants. We know it's at stake. We'll certainly break it down for you over the course of the day. Before we do, first chance back at the NovaCare complex for the Eagles to come together as a team after what transpired Monday night in Cincinnati with the almost near tragic incident and injury to Damar Hamlin. Word out of Cincinnati was that he's showing signs of improvement. Media release by the Bills said that that's the case. Not a lot of details on why that's the case or what's that what makes it that the case. But any signs of improvement this time, it's got to be good news for absolutely everybody, right?
Yeah, no question. I especially for the Bills. I know they had a Zoom meeting with a family member to get updates. You know, I am surprised. Typically in this type of situation, you know, high profile patients have a lot of updates, doctors speaking, and it's been kind of a little bit surprising how much little information has trickled out. But behind the scenes, evidently, pretty good news. Again, you know, with all things considered, and this is typical from what cardiologists say when you have a significant cardiac event. It takes a little bit of time, so that part doesn't raise any eyebrows. But yeah, behind the scenes, some good information, and that's the best you can hope for at this standpoint. As far as the Eagles, you know, everybody went through this all around the league because it's such a big story. But you know, a little surprised at how quickly it was business as usual. To be honest, I talk about this all the time. Football players have already made this analysis in their heads. They know how dangerous this game is. They know there's a cost, there's a benefit. And I think when we talk about concussions, it's the problem with concussions is, you know, 20-year-olds think differently than 50-year-olds. And, you know, at 20, you're like, yeah, I'm going to go, I'm going to make a lot of money. This is what I can do. There's not a lot of people in their early 20s that can make millions of dollars in any other industry. So you make that cost benefit analysis. A lot of them don't have families. Then as you get older, you have families, you start thinking about other things, and, you know, you think differently when you're retired. And I don't know how you fix that. This was such a you know, whatever adjective you want to use, this was such an out of the norm situation. I think a lot of players realize that, and you know, everybody hopes Demar gets better, and you know, but you got to move forward. And I think that's been the sentiment in most buildings. So when we talked about, you know, would the players group together and say we're not going to play this weekend? No, that's not going to happen. They're going to play this weekend.
And I believe that the closeness that you come to a potentially tragic event like this, the more it affects you. The way the Philadelphia Eagles reacted yesterday, their first team gathering, of course, is going to be different than the Cincinnati Bengals who are on the field with them, and certainly different from the Buffalo Bills, who that's one of their brothers. That's one of their teammates who are in the hospital bed in Cincinnati. So I think it has something to do with how close in proximity. If it was another 1 o'clock game on Sunday and there were a bunch of games being played at the same time, it would have a lesser effect. A little bit more because it was a solo Monday night. Everybody's paying attention to that type game. But if you weren't there, you're not going to be affected the same way that the players who were there were after the fact. And you add to the fact that the Eagles got to see their fallen teammate. Now, not to the degree of certainly Demar Hamlin, but they had a teammate carted off the field on Sunday. And sure enough, he was back at the NovaCare complex yesterday. with Josh Sweat being with his teammates, did not participate. They list him as quote unquote day to day, which is almost amazing unto itself. But that also is going to hit home, and the players are going to react to it, and it's going to affect the way that they think about. You mean I need to go out on the field on Sunday? As you just stated, most of them will go, yeah, that's what I do. I'm a football player, and that's I've already done the cost benefit analysis, and this is my livelihood, and that's what I'm going to do. It doesn't make them harsh. It doesn't make them hard-hearted. It just makes them one of a large group of young men who are willing to take the risks to be able to get the benefits from being an NFL player.
Yeah, and I talked to Son Reddick about, Josh and how you do that. And you think about, Josh got hurt early in the game, and the Eagles had the bad first drive defensively, and then they responded actually really well and played pretty darn well defensively for the majority of the game. And you wonder, how do you bounce back from that, and how do you refocus? And it was very similar, Son. It's just like that's what we do. Now, part of it was on the field. Like, we don't know at the time, and Nick Sirianni has let us in on this, and Fletcher Cox and Hassan as well. Josh was talking to people, and he's saying he was all okay, and after things settled down a little bit, and so they had more information right away, but things are different now, and they're very cautious, and they're going to err on the side of caution. And when you see somebody stretch it off, and you see them restricting their mobility as a precautionary measure, it's scary for fans and people that don't have information. But Josh was communicating with some of the guys, and Nick Sirianni, so they had a good feeling it wasn't going to be terrible. So everything is, and now we know with Damar Hamlin, everything is scaled. He's fighting for his life versus, God forbid, there's been far too many spinal injuries in football at every level, and that's part of the violence of this sport. But one of the things with Hamlin's created it, because remember, I always say this, Jody, when ESPN is doing something, or Fox Sports, that's one thing. When CNN shows up, and ABC News and MSNBC and Fox News show up, then it becomes this massive story that has all these tangles and political variations and all that kind of stuff. And one of the things with football is obviously violence in football. Now, football is a violent sport. I think we can all agree with that. But this was not out of the ordinary. This was not violence. This is a hit you see. I shouldn't say, because every hit is violent. But in that structure, this was not an out of the norm hit by NFL standards. You see hits that gets flagged, that cause concussions. Everybody was upset about Tua earlier in the season having what they feel is an undiagnosed concussion. It's still undiagnosed because it never got diagnosed as a concussion, but people believe it was a concussion, and perception overtakes reality. And people assume, oh, a 24-year-old player had a cardiac event on the NFL field. What a violent sport. It wasn't that.
No.
It wasn't that.
And it's something that hopefully those who don't understand, and or, as you say, the CNNs, the Fox News, you get a news reporter come in who doesn't understand the game and the way that it's played, and they're going to jump to some incorrect conclusions, which is tremendously unfortunate. But the good news was that, at least as per the report by the Bills were the biggest disseminator of information yesterday, that certain of his signs are improving. That's the only new news, as you noted there. It's not been as chock full of news updates as you would have expected. We'll take anything we can get, as long as the news is good. that's good news. And unfortunately, for a lot of us, we got to go with the flow, and we have to do what we do and talk football because that's what we do here on Birds 365. So we're not forgetting about Demar Hamlin. We're not putting him aside. We're just adding Eagles information in their upcoming game against the Giants here. And we thank you for streaming in. We weren't not going to talk about it, but we're also not going to spend the entire 2 hours talking about it today. It just makes it difficult because in a lesser comparison, we've got Eagle injury news to deal with, and it seems minuscule. It's big in the context of the Eagles versus Giants, but no life-threatening situations with the Eagles. They did activate 3 players yesterday, started their practice window. We thought only one of which was going to be a contributor, but maybe it could be more than that. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson's practice window open. Brett Tott's practice window up. Is Brett Tott still on the team? Sorry,
Yeah.
don't mean to joke, but
Come on.
he has been so far out of our consciousness. He's coming back. And Robert Quinn as well, who might actually be a guy who does get. I thought that there was a good chance we'd seen the last of Robert Quinn on the field for the Philadelphia Eagles, but we didn't know Josh Sweat was going to get hurt in the next to last game of the season. All 3 of those guys had their practice window, which yesterday was a walkthrough window, activated. What do you think the potential contributions are from these 3 players, either this week against the Giants and or come playoff time?
Well, CJ is number 1, and that's a big one, and that's an indication that they expect to get him back for the playoffs. I wouldn't expect CJ for the Giants game. You never know. I mean, you can always activate guys. It's been a long time though. So I think they want to get him back in practice, and I think the focus was always on the postseason more than rushing him back for the regular season. So you have this 21-day practice window. You don't have to activate people off injured reserve. You can take the full amount of time. You can take 14 days. You can take 13 days. So I don't think he's going to be in the mix for the Giants, but I think it's a very big deal for the postseason. And that's number 1. As you mentioned with Robert Quinn, yeah, I mean, I think that's directly related to Josh Sweat, and hopefully day to day means day to day. Again, I wouldn't expect to see him against the Giants, but hopefully Josh can make it back for the playoffs. He certainly thinks he's going to be back for the playoffs, and you needed an extra body at defensive ends, and Robert, if he's healthy, and he had that knee scoped, so it was legitimate, anytime. I was the person who said, "Oh, they have too many bodies on the defensive line. Maybe they're playing a little bit fast and loose, and putting Robert Quinn on injured reserve." But he did get the knee scope, so. It was a legitimate injury, but obviously, somebody who's been playing as long as Robert Quinn, you always have things wrong with you, and maybe they just took advantage of it that way to get it fixed. And maybe, who knows, maybe he can contribute. He's been a good player in the past. With Toth, I think it's more of, you're at the end of the season. He's been ready to go from a physical standpoint for a long time. He tore his ACL in week 18 last year. And the Eagles didn't want to lose him. They like him as a player, but they didn't have a spot with the depth they have on the offensive line right now. So they just kept him off to the side. Now that the season is ending, they can get him in practice. He can work with the team, but I don't think it's relevant to, being activated or being a contributor or anything of that nature. Now, that could change too. I mean, we know Lane's situation. He's going to try to play through it, but can he play through it? Now, the Eagles still have Jack Driscoll and Andre Dillard, and those guys are the ones who are main in the mix. Brett is very versatile, but right now they don't need another body. So I think it's just about getting him some work before the end of the season. And he can now get back into practice. So I don't think that's as relevant to the roster as the other two. And then you have the Jalen Hurts, obviously very good sign. He was limited. And the reason why is because Wednesday's install day. So, that's when you install the game plan. So the fact that this is the first time he's done any work during install day, so to speak. So that's a very good sign. I think we'll have a very clear picture today, as I mentioned, if Jalen's going to play or not, unless the Eagles kick us out of practice before the ball security drills, which is always a possibility with this team. But typically they don't do that. So I think we're going to get a very good indication on whether he's going to play today. And any other injuries I missed of interest?
No, the most important one, as you said, is the Jalen Hurts one. And it was reported that he took first team reps in the walkthrough. Are there really first team? It's a walkthrough. What does first team reps in a walkthrough mean?
Yeah, I think it's more of, he was involved with the install, as I said. And that's significant. Basically where that comes from is probably, when you see Eagles source, it probably means an Eagles player, whispered it and to their mind, he's burst out there working on installs. So that's probably what they mean by that.
Well, whatever it is, it's good news. Again, we take what good news we can get in whatever shape or form. And the fact that it is trending in the direction of Jalen Hurts being ready to go and ready to start against the Giants, I got to believe is good news as far as Eagle fans are concerned. We appreciate you, Eagle fans, streaming on with us here on Birds 365. You got John McMullen and Jody McDonald here. We will add a third voice. He's a familiar one, jumps on with us all the time. Martin Frank from the Delaware News Journal going to join us next here on Birds.